She was a successful 32-year-old businesswoman. Everyone in São Paulo knew her as the woman who built a tech empire from nothing, turning artificial intelligence into wealth and influence. But when her mother texted, "Don't come to the wedding, you'll embarrass us," Amara Santos realized something cold and painful. No amount of money could shield her from the harshest judgment of all her own family's disapproval. You're about to see what happens when success meets family rejection. Meet Amara Santos, 32, founder of an AI consultancy in São Paulo. A woman who built an empire from scratch. Tall, elegant posture, natural hair in carefully arranged braids, warm brown eyes that reveal both vulnerability and strength. On the outside, she was everything people admired. Successful entrepreneur, independent, powerful. But on the inside, Amara carried a wound that no professional success could heal. A wound her own mother had opened years ago. A wound that never completely healed. The afternoon her whole world shifted. Amara was in her penthouse in Pinheiros, a space she'd earned through years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto São Paulo, sprawling endlessly in every direction. Italian marble underfoot, carefully curated furniture and contemporary art gracing the walls. Every single thing had been chosen deliberately, paid for with the work of her own hands. She had just closed the biggest contract in her company's history. 3-million-reais. An artificial intelligence project for one of Brazil's largest corporations. Her team was celebrating at the office. Champagne, hugs, praise. But Amara had come home early. Because today wasn't just about business. Today was about family. She was sitting on the gray velvet sofa, phone in hand, scrolling through messages from her younger sister, Beatriz. Her baby sister was getting married in 2 weeks, a big traditional wedding in Ribeirão Preto, the small countryside town where Amara had grown up. The place she'd left behind a decade ago, swearing she'd never look back. Beatriz had sent photos of the preparations, the dress, the flowers, the venue, everything beautifully planned. And at the end of the message, a simple question. "You're coming, right?" Amara had typed and deleted the answer 3 times. Because she knew the truth. She knew her presence at the wedding wouldn't be welcome. Not by her sister. Beatriz loved her. But by their mother. Helena Santos, 58 years old. A retired seamstress who'd devoted her entire existence to keeping up appearances. The kind of woman who believed your value was determined entirely by what the neighbors thought of you. And Amara? Amara had become everything Helena Santos feared. Independent, questioning, different. The phone vibrated in Amara's hands. A new message, but not from Beatriz, from her mother. Dread pooled in Amara's stomach before she even opened it. Messages from her mother were never just messages. They were always loaded with criticism. Always laced with the kind of judgment she'd learned to disguise as concern. She slid her finger across the screen. The words appeared, each one like a knife. "Amara, don't come to the wedding. You'll embarrass us. Beatriz deserves a perfect day without distractions. You understand, right? It's better this way." Amara read the message once, twice, 3 times. Each reading increased the pain. Each word cut deeper. "Don't come to the wedding. You'll embarrass us. Without distractions. It's better this way." Her own mother. Her own family. Asking her to stay away. As if her presence were a stain. As if her existence were a cause for shame. Amara felt hot tears welling up. But she stopped them from falling. No. She wasn't going to cry. Not again. She had already cried too much for this woman. For this family that never accepted her the way she was. She stood up from the sofa, walked to the window. Down below, São Paulo pulsed with life. Cars, people, opportunities. This was the city that embraced her when her family rejected her. This was the city where she became somebody. But why did it still hurt so much? Why did that woman's approval still matter? Amara closed her eyes. Memories invaded her mind like a flood. She was 16 when she told Helena she wanted to study technology instead of finding a husband young, like her mother had done. The look on her mother's face, disappointment mixed with something darker. Disgust. "You're throwing your life away, Amara." What man is going to want a woman with all these wild ideas? At 22, her acceptance to the University of São Paulo arrived, a full scholarship in computer engineering. She practically glowed with excitement. Helena's reaction? Just a heavy sigh. That city will destroy you. Trust me on this. You'll end up regretting it. At 25, she took the leap and opened her own company. 3 clients, a cramped office space, a whole lot of nerve. She called her mother expecting pride or encouragement, anything really. She got dead air. You? A businesswoman? Amara, come back down to earth. And now, at 32, with a successful company, luxury apartment, professional recognition, she was still the daughter who embarrassed the family. Why? Because she didn't follow the script. Because she chose her own dreams instead of the dreams Helena had for her. Amara opened her eyes. Tears finally fell, but she wiped them away with anger. Anger at herself for still caring. Anger at her mother for never seeing her. Anger at a system that measured a woman's worth by conformity instead of courage. She looked at the phone again. Her mother's message still glowed on the screen like an accusation. Don't come to the wedding. You'll embarrass us. Something inside Amara changed in that moment. A silent but profound transformation. Because she realized something fundamental. She had spent her whole life trying to prove her worth to people who refused to see her. She had built an empire, yet still felt small in Helena's presence. She had earned the respect of executives, investors, clients. But the only approval she truly wanted, her own mother's, remained eternally out of reach. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop asking for permission to exist. Amara took a deep breath. Her hands stopped shaking. Her vision cleared. An idea began to form. An audacious idea. An idea that scared and thrilled her at the same time. She wasn't going to hide. She wasn't going to accept the shame they tried to cast on her. She wouldn't let them define her by their fears. She was going to the wedding. But not in the way they expected. Not as the rejected, ashamed daughter, begging for acceptance. She was going to show up as who she really was. Unapologetic. Without dimming her light to make others feel comfortable. Amara grabbed her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen with renewed determination. She opened the chat with Marcus, her business partner and best friend. The man who had helped her build the company from scratch. The man who knew all her secrets. She typed 3 words. 3 words that would change everything. It's time, bring it. Marcus replied in seconds. A thumbs up emoji. And then, I was waiting for you to ask. Get ready. It's going to be epic. Amara smiled for the first time since receiving her mother's message. It was a small smile. Still trembling, but real. She looked out the window one more time. The sun was setting over São Paulo, painting the sky orange and pink. Beautiful, powerful, impossible to ignore. Just like she would be in 2 weeks. Amara Santos, the daughter who shamed the family, was about to make an entrance no one would ever forget. And when she arrived at Beatriz's wedding, everyone would see the truth Helena Santos refused to accept. Success wasn't shameful. Independence wasn't failure. And a woman who built her own empire would never, ever be a distraction. She would be the main event. Amara grabbed her laptop, opened her calendar. 2 weeks, 14 days to plan, 14 days to prepare, 14 days until she showed her family that you can't shame someone who refuses to feel shame. She started making notes, details, preparations. Everything had to be perfect, because this wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about dignity. It was about finally refusing to make herself small so others could feel big. It was about looking Helena Santos in the eye and saying without words, "You were wrong about me." The phone buzzed again. Beatriz. "Sis, are you coming?" Amara smiled. She typed the reply with steady hands. "Yes, I'm coming." And she would go. God, how she would go. For the next 14 days, Amara Santos would prepare for the most important moment of her life. Not a business contract, not a product launch, but something much deeper. The moment she would finally stop asking for approval and start living her truth. The moment the rejected daughter would become impossible to ignore. The moment Helena Santos would have to confront the most uncomfortable question of all. What if I was wrong about my own daughter? Amara closed her laptop, grabbed a glass of wine, toasted alone in the silent penthouse. To Beatrice's wedding, she whispered, where everything will change. Outside, São Paulo sparkled under the night sky. And inside the apartment, a woman who spent her life feeling small was beginning to claim her true size. Giant, brilliant, impossible to hide. Her mother's message was still on the phone screen. Don't come to the wedding. You will embarrass us. But Amara didn't feel shame anymore. She felt something new, something powerful, determination. She picked up her phone one last time before bed, opened the message to Marcus. He had replied with details, photos, confirmations. Everything was ready. In 2 weeks, a black Rolls-Royce would pull into the reception hall parking lot in Ribeirão Preto. And when the door opened, everyone would see who Amara Santos really was. Not the ashamed daughter, not the family disappointment, but a woman who turned rejection into fuel, pain into power, shame into strength. Amara turned off the lights and lay down on the king-size bed, staring up at the ceiling in the dark. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep without the suffocating weight of trying to be who everyone else demanded she be. Because in 14 days, everyone would see the truth. And the truth was this. You can try to shame a woman. You can reject her. You can tell her she's not enough. But if she refuses to accept your shame, if she chooses her own dignity, you cannot stop her. And Amara Santos was about to prove that to her entire family. Beatrice's wedding would be beautiful. The flowers would be perfect. The food would be delicious. But the moment everyone would remember forever would be the arrival. The arrival of the daughter who wasn't supposed to be there. The arrival of the woman who refused to fade away. The arrival in a Rolls-Royce that said without words, I am enough. I always was. You just couldn't see it. Amara closed her eyes, smiled in the dark. Get ready, she whispered. Get ready to see who I really am. And with that, she finally rested. Because the war with her family had begun. But for the first time, she wasn't fighting for their approval. She was fighting for herself. And that was a battle she had already won the moment she decided to show up. The rest? The rest was just showing everyone what Helena Santos had always refused to accept. Her daughter was magnificent, and no text message could change that. But sleep was impossible. Because when Amara Santos closed her eyes, she found no rest. She found memories. And those memories were not kind. The first to surface came wrapped in summer light and the smell of rice burning in the pot. Amara was 16. She was sitting at the kitchen table in their house in Ribeirão Preto, holding a flyer for an IT technical school. Her eyes shone with something that back then she still dared to call hope. Helena Santos stood by the stove, arms crossed, lips thin as blades. Mom, I want to study programming. There's a technical course starting in March. If I get in, I can work with technology, create systems, maybe even open my own company one day. Helena didn't look at her. She continued stirring the beans with unnecessary force, as if she could dissolve Amara's idea along with the grains. A company. You can barely wash a pot right and you already want to open a company. Amara, wake up to reality. Girls like you don't become business owners. They become wives. They become mothers. If you're lucky, you get a job as a secretary. Computers won't pay your bills. Men do. But I don't want to depend on any man, Mom. I want to build something of my own. Build. Helena finally turned her face, and Amara saw something in those eyes she couldn't name at the time. Years later, as a successful adult, she would finally find the right word. Envy. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? Think you're going to leave here and become something. Let me tell you something, girl. People like us don't become anything. We survive. And surviving requires humility. Something you don't have. Amara remembered swallowing her tears. She remembered tucking the flyer into her backpack. And she remembered, with painful clarity, signing up for the course anyway, in secret, paying the installments with the money she earned selling chocolate truffles at school. Because even at 16, Amara Santos already knew a fundamental truth. If she waited for Helena's approval, she'd die waiting. The second memory came 6 years later. Amara was 22. She was standing in the living room of the same house, holding a letter from USP, the University of São Paulo, acceptance into the graduate program for artificial intelligence. She had just graduated in information systems, finished at the top of her class, secured a full scholarship for her master's. And in that moment, with the letter in her hands, she thought that maybe, just maybe, Helena would finally see. Finally acknowledge that the daughter she insisted on belittling was, in fact, extraordinary. Helena read the letter in silence. Beatriz, then 18, stood beside her mother, eyes wide with genuine admiration. "Mara, that's incredible! USP, you're going to live in São Paulo." "Live in São Paulo." Helena handed back the letter like she was returning trash. "Letting São Paulo swallow you whole, you mean? Amara, you are not going." The words fell like lead. "What do you mean I'm not going? Mom, it's a full scholarship. It's USP. It's everything I ever wanted. Everything you ever wanted. And what about what I want, Amara? What about what your family needs? You're going to abandon us to go play scientist in São Paulo while I stay here, alone, taking care of everything? You have Bia, you have Aunt Conceição living 2 streets over. You're not alone. I'm not alone because you are still here. But if you go, Amara, if you choose this selfish life, don't bother coming back, because there won't be a family waiting for you." Silence. Beatriz lowered her head. Amara felt the floor open up beneath her feet. And yet, 3 months later, she packed her bags. Even with a broken heart, even knowing Helena would carry out her threat, Amara Santos went. Because the alternative was to wither away. It was dying by degrees in a city that had no room for her dreams. And if she needed to choose between her family and herself, then for the first time in her life, Amara chose herself. The third memory was at 25. Amara had already been in São Paulo for 3 years. She had finished her master's. She had landed a job at a tech startup. And on that day, in the small apartment she shared with 2 roommates, she made the decision that would change everything. She would open her own company, artificial intelligence consulting, predictive systems for companies that wanted to optimize processes. She had the knowledge, she had the contacts, she had the courage. What she didn't have was support. She called Helena. They hadn't spoken in months. Her mother answered her calls with glacial coldness, answering in monosyllables, making it clear that Amara had made her choice and now had to live with the consequences. But that day, Amara tried again. "Hello, Mom, it's me." Silence on the other end. Dead silence. "Mom, I'm calling because I wanted to tell you something. I'm starting my own company, AI Consulting. I've got 2 clients ready to sign and an amazing partner. We're officially launching next month." Amara had hoped for a congratulations, maybe some words of encouragement. Even just the warmth of neutral silence would have been something. Instead, she got this. "A company. You again with these ideas. Amara, when are you going to stop deluding yourself? You weren't born for this. You don't have the foundation for this. And do you know what everyone here says about you? They say you've become stuck up, that you forgot where you came from, that you turned into one of those São Paulo women who think they're better than others." "I don't think I'm better than anyone, Mom. I just want to build a life that makes sense to me." Sense. Helena practically spat the word out. "You want to know what makes sense, Amara? Family, roots, respect, things you threw away when you decided you were too good for us." And she hung up. Amara stared at the phone for long minutes. Then, with trembling hands, she sent a message to Marcus, her business partner. Just 3 words. "Let's move forward." And they did. Over the next 7 years, Amara's company grew. Slowly at first, then like a rocket. Contracts with multinationals, tech innovation awards, features in specialized magazines. Amara Santos, the young CEO who was revolutionizing the AI market in Brazil. But in every achievement, there was an absence. At 28, when she closed her first 7-figure deal, she called Helena. Her mother answered, listened in silence, and said only this: Money doesn't buy character, Amara, and hung up. At 30, when she made the cover of a major business magazine, she sent a copy to the family home. Helena sent it right back with a note attached. I don't care about other people's vanity projects. At 31, when she bought the penthouse in São Paulo, the dream apartment with a view of the entire city, she thought about inviting her family over. She didn't, because she already knew the answer. And at 32, when she received the invitation to Beatriz's wedding, for the first time in years, Amara felt hope again. Because maybe, just maybe, a moment as important as her younger sister's wedding would be enough for Helena to let her guard down. To finally see the daughter standing before her. But then came the message. Don't come to the wedding. You'll only embarrass us. And Amara understood. She understood that it didn't matter how much she achieved. It didn't matter how many awards she won, how many companies she built, how many barriers she broke. To Helena Santos, her daughter would always be that stubborn 16-year-old girl who dared to want more than she was allowed. And that realization was, paradoxically, liberating. Because if Amara would never be good enough in her mother's eyes, then she didn't need to try anymore. She didn't need to rack her brain anymore, trying to understand what was wrong with her. There was nothing wrong. There never was. The problem was never Amara. The problem was always Helena, and her inability to celebrate a daughter who had the courage to do what Helena herself never dared. To live. It was with this thought that Amara, at 3 in the morning on that sleepless night, picked up the phone again. This time she didn't call her mother. She called Marcus. He answered on the third ring, his voice raspy with sleep. Mara, you okay? What time is it? 3 in the morning. Sorry to wake you, but I need a favor. Marcus was already more alert. He'd known Amara for 10 years. He knew that when she called at 3 in the morning, it was serious. Shoot. Remember that Rolls-Royce we thought about renting for the company campaign last year? I remember. The Phantom. Why? Can you get one for me by tomorrow afternoon? Silence on the other end. Then, slowly, Marcus started to laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of someone who finally understood. Mara, are you going to do what I think you're going to do? I'm going to my sister's wedding. Your mom didn't invite you. I know, but you know what I found out, Marcus. I don't need an invitation. I don't need approval. I don't need anyone's permission to exist in spaces that belong to me. And Beatriz is my sister. I have every right to be there. Marcus was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was serious, protective. Are you sure? Because this is going to cause an earthquake, Mara. You know that. I know. And you know something. I'm tired of shrinking myself to fit into their world. I'm tired of hiding who I am so I don't bother them. If they want to treat me like a disgrace, then so be it. But I'm going to show up, and I'm going to show up exactly as I am. Successful, accomplished, magnificent. On the other end of the line, Marcus smiled. Amara couldn't see it, but she felt it. The Phantom will be at your door tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. Driver and everything. You just need to show up. Thanks, Marcus. Go get 'em, Mara. Show them who you are. And she hung up. Amara stood there holding the phone, heart racing, a strange mix of fear and euphoria taking over her chest. For the first time in weeks, she got out of bed. She went to the nightstand. She opened the bottom drawer, the one she rarely opened because it held things that hurt too much to see often. And there, among old papers and yellowed letters, she found what she was looking for. A photograph. Amara and Beatriz. Bea was 7. Amara was 11. They were hugging in the backyard of the house in Ribeirão Preto, smiling for the camera with that reckless joy of those who haven't yet known disappointment. Beatriz was wearing a pink dress that Amara had helped choose. Amara was wearing a t-shirt with a star print. Back then, they were inseparable. Beatriz followed Amara everywhere. Mara, teach me to read. Mara, take me to play. Mara, stay with me. And Amara stayed. She always stayed. But over time, with the fights, with Helena's pressure, with the geographic and emotional distance that settled between Amara and the family, that closeness came undone. Beatriz continued to love her older sister. Amara knew that. But Bea also loved her mother. And in the conflict between the two, Beatriz chose silence. She never defended Amara openly. She never confronted Helena. She just stayed in the middle, trying to keep the peace, being the perfect daughter Amara could never be. And maybe that was why Amara needed to go to the wedding. Not just for herself, but for those two girls in the photograph. For the sister she still loved, despite everything. For the chance, however slim, that maybe, just maybe, Beatriz would be happy to see her. Amara held the photo carefully, like she was holding something sacred, and she whispered, very softly, words that no one but herself heard. "They have no idea who I've become." And they really didn't. Because the Amara they knew was the insecure 16-year-old girl, the desperate 22-year-old, the rejected daughter at 25. But the woman arriving at that wedding the next day was someone else. She was someone who had built an empire from scratch, who had faced the country's most competitive market and won, who had turned pain into fuel, rejection into determination, shame into power. Helena Santos had called her daughter a disgrace. What she was about to discover was that a disgrace was the last thing Amara Santos could ever be. She put the photograph back in the drawer, closed it carefully, and finally, after hours awake, went back to bed. This time, she slept. Because the war had already begun. But for the first time in her life, Amara Santos wasn't fighting for anyone's approval. She was fighting for herself. And that battle, she had already won the moment she decided to exist without asking permission. The rest was just performance. And Amara had always been excellent at performances. The morning arrived faster than Amara expected. 6 o'clock. 4 hours of intermittent sleep. Fragmented dreams with her mother's voice repeating words she had spent years trying to forget. But when the São Paulo light began to filter through her bedroom curtains, Amara Santos was no longer afraid. She was ready. The apartment that woke her wasn't just any apartment. It was a 300-square-meter penthouse in the heart of Jardins, with a panoramic view that embraced the entire city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble floors that reflected the morning light like water. Furniture chosen not for the price, but for the beauty, for the sense of belonging that each piece brought. Amara had bought this place 3 years ago, paid in cash. With money she had earned herself. With sweat she had shed herself. With sleepless nights no one in her family would ever know existed. She got up slowly. Her feet touched the cold floor, and the shock was comforting. Real. Present. She crossed the silent hallway to the open kitchen, where the Italian coffee machine had already been programmed the night before. The aroma of Ethiopian beans filled the air. She poured a cup, took the first sip looking out the window, watching São Paulo slowly wake up. Buildings, movement, life happening while she prepared to return to the place that once defined her as nothing. Ribeirão Preto seemed so far from here. It wasn't just 300 kilometers. It was an entire universe away. Amara placed the cup on the counter and walked to the closet. It wasn't a closet. It was a whole room. Illuminated glass shelves, clothes organized by color, by occasion, by season, shoes aligned like works of art, handbags that cost many people's monthly salary. She stopped at the entrance and looked at it all. For a second, she felt something strange. It wasn't pride. It wasn't satisfaction. It was almost vertigo. As if she were looking at someone else's life, but it wasn't someone else's life. It was hers. Amara Santos had built this, brick by brick, contract by contract, client by client. She had turned code into money, algorithms into freedom, artificial intelligence into real power, power her mother didn't even know existed. She chose a dress, not just any dress, a custom-made dress by a Brazilian designer who now showed in Paris. Fluid fabric in deep blue tones, almost black, that moved like water over the skin. Elegant neckline, open back, length ending just below the knees, sophisticated without being exaggerated, powerful without shouting, perfect. She laid the dress on the king-size bed and went back to the bathroom. Calicotta marble on the walls, soaking tub she rarely used because she never had time. Shower with perfect pressure that now welcomed her like a warm hug. Amara stayed under the water longer than necessary. Let the heat dissolve the tension in her shoulders. Let the steam fill her lungs. Let the water wash away everything remaining of the insecure girl who once believed her mother's words. When she stepped out, she was different, firmer, more present. She dried her body slowly, applied lotion with precise movements, chose her makeup with care. Nothing exaggerated. Light foundation, defined eyes, nude lipstick with a touch of shine, natural hair and defined curls, pinned in an elegant low bun that left her neck exposed. She put on the dress, adjusted the fabric, looked at the full-length mirror, and for the first time in a long time, Amara Santos saw the woman she really was. Not the rejected daughter, not the forgotten sister, not the disgrace her mother had described in the text, just Amara, successful, elegant, whole. She picked up the earrings, real black pearls she had bought in Tokyo during a business trip the previous year. Put them on carefully. The small but significant weight on her ears was like a silent affirmation. I deserve to be here. She left the bedroom and walked to the office. Another room that told a story her family completely ignored. Shelves filled with books on technology, artificial intelligence, business management, a glass desk with 2 state-of-the-art monitors, and on the wall behind the desk, something made Amara pause. Awards. These weren't just decorative plaques. They were real acknowledgments. Technological Innovation Award from Exam Magazine, Entrepreneur of the Year Trophy from Endeavor, certification as the most promising AI sector company from the Brazilian Association of Startups, a framed photo of her shaking hands with the governor of São Paulo during a technology incentive ceremony. Amara had put all this there not to show off. She had put it there to remember, on difficult days, in moments of doubt. When her mother's voice still echoed in her head saying she would never amount to anything. She touched the edge of one of the trophies. Cold. Solid. Real. Helena Santos thought her daughter was a disgrace. But the evidence told another story. A story Amara had written alone, without anyone's permission, without anyone's approval, without the validation she once believed she needed. Her phone vibrated. Marcus. I'm at the lobby. Ready? Amara took a deep breath. She looked around the office one more time, looked at the awards, at the books, at the life she had built in secret, protected from the family that never believed in her. And then she replied, Ready. She picked up her bag, a discreet Bottega Veneta in black leather. She put only the essentials inside. Phone, wallet, lipstick, keys, and a photo. The same photo she had looked at the night before. Her and Beatriz as children, smiling, before everything fell apart. She closed the apartment door behind her and went down the private elevator. Each floor passing was like a layer of protection being removed. When the doors opened on the ground floor, Amara Santos was completely exposed. And completely ready. Marcus was waiting in front of the building. He wasn't alone. Beside him, parked like a creature from another world in the middle of São Paulo, was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Black, imposing, impossible to ignore. Amara stopped. Not because she was impressed with the car. She had seen cars like that before. She had even considered buying one. But she always found it too flashy. Too obvious. Too performative. But now, looking at that machine of silent luxury, Amara understood. It wasn't about the car. It was about the message. Marcus approached. He was wearing a dark suit, an immaculate tie, with the posture of someone who had spent years alongside Amara building an empire while the rest of the world underestimated them. Are you sure about this? He asked. Voice low. Serious. Amara looked at him. At the best friend who had become a partner. At the man who believed in her when no one else did. Who signed contracts with her when investors laughed at the idea of 2 black people creating an artificial intelligence consultancy in a country that barely understood what that meant. Marcus had been there. On the impossible days, in the humiliating meetings, in the rejections that hurt more than any text from her mother, and he was here now, holding the keys to a Rolls-Royce rented especially for this occasion, offering her the chance to make a statement that could not be ignored. I'm sure, Amara said. And this time, her voice didn't tremble. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a smile of victory. It was a smile of recognition, of respect. He handed her the keys. Then go out there and show them who you really are. Amara took the keys. The metal was heavy in her palm. Not by its physical weight, by its symbolic weight, by what it represented. She walked to the car, opened the door. The interior was everything she expected. Beige leather, polished wood, almost sacred silence. The kind of silence only money can buy. She got in, adjusted the seat, fastened her seatbelt, started the engine. The sound was almost imperceptible, a low purr, contained, powerful, like a sleeping beast that could awaken at any moment. Marcus tapped on the window. Amara rolled it down. "Remember," he said, "you're not doing this for them. You're doing it for yourself." Amara nodded, but inside she knew it wasn't that simple. It never was that simple. Because no matter how much she had built this life, no matter how much she had achieved all this alone, there was still a part of her, small but persistent, that wanted Helena Santos to look at her daughter and finally see not the disgrace, but the woman. Marcus stepped away. Amara closed the window, programmed the GPS for Ribeirão Preto, 315 kilometers, 3.5 hours on the road, 3.5 hours to prepare, to breathe, to remember who she was and why it mattered. The car glided out of the garage, silent, smooth, powerful. São Paulo opened before her. Avenida Paulista, Bandeirantes, the road that led to the countryside, to the past, to the confrontation she had avoided for years. But this time, Amara was not running away. She was moving forward. The road was quiet. The Phantom cut through the asphalt as if floating. Inside, everything was calm. Outside, the world sped by. Amara turned on the sound, chose a playlist she had made years ago. Smooth jazz, female voices singing about pain and overcoming. Songs that accompanied her through sleepless nights, moments of solitude, victories no one witnessed. The music filled the space, and for the first time since receiving her mother's text, Amara allowed herself to feel everything. The anger, the resentment, the fear, but also something more, something she didn't expect. Hope. Hope that perhaps, just perhaps, Helena Santos could see beyond her own shame. That perhaps Beatriz could understand that Amara had never abandoned her family. She had merely chosen not to disappear. That perhaps, in the end, it would all be worth it. The kilometers passed. 100. 150. 200. And with each kilometer, Amara felt something changing. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't exactly courage. It was something deeper. It was acceptance. Acceptance that she had done everything right. That she had built a worthy life. That she didn't need anyone's approval to validate who she was. But also acceptance that wanting that approval didn't make her weak. It made her human. Amara Santos was many things. Businesswoman, entrepreneur. A black woman who had triumphed in a market not built for her. But before all of that, she was still a daughter, still a sister, still carried within her the girl who once just wanted to be loved by her own mother. And there was no shame in that. The sign appeared on the road. Ribeirão Preto, 50 kilometers. Amara's heart quickened. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. Her breathing grew shallow. She picked up her phone, opened her messages, read her mother's words again. "Don't come to the wedding. You'll only shame us." And then, for the first time, Amara responded. Not with words, but with action. She accelerated. The Phantom responded instantly. Powerful engine pushing the car forward. Asphalt disappearing beneath the wheels. Inevitable destination approaching with each second. 30 kilometers. 20. 10. Amara entered the city. The familiar streets. The familiar corners. The square where she used to play as a child. The church where Beatriz was about to get married. Everything the same. Everything different. Because Amara had changed. And she was about to prove it. She followed the signs to the wedding venue. A farm on the outskirts of the city. A beautiful place. Expensive. The kind of place Helena Santos would have chosen to impress the neighbors. To show that the Santos family had class, had dignity, had worth. Amara parked the Rolls-Royce at the entrance, turned off the engine, sat in silence for a moment. The wedding hadn't started yet. Guests were arriving, ordinary cars, People dressed in nice, but not extraordinary clothes. All very normal. And then she appeared, in the black Phantom. Amara looked in the rearview mirror, adjusted her lipstick, took a deep breath, placed her hand on the door handle, and remembered Marcus's words. Show them who you really are. But more than that, she remembered her own words. The words she had told herself the night before, when she decided she would go. I don't need to prove anything to anyone, but I deserve to exist without asking permission. Amara opened the door. The sound immediately drew attention. It wasn't noise, it was presence. It was the impossibility of ignoring. It was the Rolls-Royce Phantom, the ultimate symbol of wealth and status, parked in front of a farm in Ribeirão Preto, as if it had fallen from another planet. People stopped, turned, looked, and Amara Santos stepped out of the car, feet touching the ground, deep blue dress flowing like water, erect posture, firm eyes, undeniable presence. She didn't run, she didn't hide, she didn't lower her head. She walked, straight toward the entrance, straight toward the wedding, straight toward the family who had called her a disgrace. And the only thing Amara felt at that moment, as all eyes fixed on her like inescapable spotlights, was absolute clarity. Helena Santos was right about one thing. Amara Santos really was going to shame the family, but not in the way her mother imagined. She was going to shame the narrative they had created, the story they told about the failed daughter, the lie they had sustained for years to justify the rejection. Because the truth was here now, dressed in blue, stepping out of a Rolls-Royce, walking with her head held high, and the truth was impossible to ignore. Amara took another step, and another, and another. The noise around her began to grow. Whispers, questions, shock. Who is she? Where did that car come from? Is that a Rolls-Royce? But Amara heard none of it, or rather, she heard it, but it didn't matter, because she was focused, present, completely aware of every movement, every breath, every heartbeat that brought her closer to the confrontation she had avoided for years. She reached the entrance. The door was open. Soft music played inside. Elegant decor. White flowers. Everything prepared for Beatriz Santos's perfect wedding. Amara stopped at the doorway. Inside, people talked, laughed, waited for the ceremony to begin. No one had noticed her yet. No one knew that the rejected daughter was about to enter. Amara looked back. At the Rolls-Royce parked like an undeniable declaration. She looked ahead. At the wedding. At the family. At Helena Santos, who was probably somewhere inside, confident that her disgraceful daughter had finally obeyed. And Amara smiled. It wasn't a smile of revenge. It wasn't a smile of anger. It was the smile of someone who finally understood something fundamental. She didn't need their approval, but she deserved their respect, and she was about to demand exactly that. Amara Santos took the last step, crossed the threshold, entered the wedding, and the world she knew was about to change forever. Because disgrace was what they expected, but what they were going to receive was something completely different. Truth, power, dignity. And a woman who had learned, in the hardest way possible, that the only judgment that truly mattered was her own. Amara took a deep breath, and thought, with a crystal-clear clarity that cut through years of pain and rejection, let's show them what disgrace really looks like. She moved forward, straight into the heart of the storm she had avoided for so long. And this time, she wasn't running away. She was finally, completely, moving toward her own truth. The soft purr of the Rolls-Royce broke the elegant silence of the afternoon. It wasn't an aggressive sound. It was something worse. It was the quiet signature of power. It was the kind of sound that made people stop what they were doing and look up, even without knowing why. The wedding venue was exactly what Amara had imagined. An immaculate garden in the heart of Ribeirão Preto, where the local elites celebrated their moments of glory. White flowers intertwined on cast-iron arches, tables with cream linen tablecloths, chairs with satin bows fluttering gently in the afternoon breeze. And there, gliding up the white gravel driveway like a black panther among doves, was the Rolls-Royce Phantom. The first person to notice was a valet. He froze with the keys to a Mercedes in his hand, eyes fixed on the approaching car. It wasn't just the vehicle, it was the way it moved, without haste, without anxiety, as if the whole world could wait. The car stopped, the engine cut out, and for a moment that seemed to last an eternity, nothing happened. Just the tense silence of 200 guests realizing something was off script. Amara saw everything through the slightly tinted glass. She saw heads turning. She saw necks craning. She saw conversations dying mid-sentence. She took a deep breath. Once, twice, and then she opened the door. The first detail the guests noticed was the shoe. Blood-red Louboutin touching the gravel with the delicacy of someone who knew exactly the impact she was making. Then came the dress. Not white, obviously. That would be an insult to the bride, but a deep navy blue that hugged every curve with haute couture precision. Fabric that cost more per yard than most people earned in a week. And then Amara stood up. All of her. 5'9" of elegance that had been forged not in beauty salons, but in boardrooms, in investor presentations, in sleepless nights building something from scratch. She closed the car door behind her with a soft click, and walked. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, not because anyone asked, but because in the presence of someone who knew exactly who she was, space just created itself. It was Aunt Conceição who broke the silence first. Of course it was her. My God, it's Amara. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried that piercing quality that all professional gossips master. Helena's Amara. The one who... well, you know. Heads turned like falling dominoes. First to Conceição, then to the Rolls-Royce, then to Amara, and then back to the car, as if they needed to confirm they weren't hallucinating. Is that a Rolls-Royce? Someone whispered. Phantom. Latest generation. The answer came from a man in an expensive suit who clearly knew luxury cars. About 2 million-reais, at least. 2 million? The woman next to him almost choked on her champagne, but I thought so too. The voice was low, but curious. Not judgmental yet, just confused. Conceição didn't waste time. She was already moving between groups, her voice carrying that tone of fake concern that was her trademark. Poor Helena. Imagine the humiliation. Her daughter showing up like this, making a scene. And in a rented car, for sure. You know how she is. Always one for drama, always wanting attention. Since she was little, trying to be more than she really was. But there was something in Conceição's voice that hadn't been there before. A slight uncertainty. Because even she, with all her experience in gossip, knew that no one rented a Rolls-Royce Phantom for an afternoon. The cost would be astronomical. And Amara's posture, that wasn't someone pretending. That was someone who belonged. Amara heard everything, every whisper, every speculation, every rushed judgment. But she didn't stop. She didn't turn. She didn't justify. She just kept walking, her steps measured and confident on the gravel that now felt like a red carpet. And then she saw Beatriz. Her sister stood at the top of the entrance steps surrounded by her bridesmaids in matching lavender gowns, all holding coordinated bouquets. They'd clearly been frozen in the middle of a pre-ceremony photo moment. When Beatriz's eyes found Amara, something shattered in her expression. It wasn't anger or shame. It was something much more complicated and devastating. Pure, overwhelming happiness at seeing the sister she loved, crashing directly into the terror of knowing their mother was watching. It was the pride of seeing Amara there, so beautiful, so powerful, clashing head-on with the vivid memory of that message. Don't come to the wedding. You'll embarrass us. Beatriz took a step forward. Her bridesmaids tried to hold her back, but she shook them off, descended 3 steps. 4. 5. Amara. Just that one word, but it came loaded with 28 years of history. Childhood dolls shared between them, midnight confessions, a younger sister who'd always treated her older sister like she was made of light, even when everyone else insisted she was nothing but darkness. Amara stopped in her tracks. For the first time since stepping out of that car, her carefully constructed armor cracked just a fraction. It was enough for Beatriz to see the real Amara underneath. You came. Beatriz practically ran toward her, her wedding dress sweeping behind her like white water. You really actually came. But before she could reach Amara, a voice cut through the air like a knife. Beatriz, get back here. Right now. Helena. The sound of her mother's voice stopped Beatriz cold. Helena stood on the side veranda, one hand gripping a marble column like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She wore a champagne-colored dress with gold threadwork. Her hair was pinned back in an immaculate bun. Her jewelry was subtle, expensive, carefully chosen to suggest elegance rather than announce it. But her face said everything. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost walk out of a car, or worse, like someone had just shown her a truth she'd spent 5 years denying. Her eyes went from Amara's face to the Rolls-Royce, from the Rolls-Royce to the dress, from the dress to the shoes, from the shoes to the discreet but unmistakably real jewelry on Amara's neck and wrists, and then back to her daughter's face. The daughter she had called a disgrace. The daughter who could apparently buy this entire wedding 3 times over and still have change. Helena said nothing, but her mouth parted slightly, and something that might have been a sound escaped. It wasn't quite a word, it was more the ghost of one. Beatriz was frozen halfway between her mother and her sister, literally. She stood there, the bouquet trembling in her hands, her eyes filling with tears she wasn't allowed to shed because her bridal makeup couldn't be ruined. Mom! Her voice was a plea. Mom, please. But Helena wasn't looking at Beatriz. She was locked on Amara, and there was something terrible in that look. It wasn't just shock. It was the kind of realization that shatters a person's world. The kind that rewrites the last 5 years in a split second. Raphael, the groom, appeared beside Beatriz. He was handsome in that conventional way that mothers always approve of. Well-groomed hair, tailored suit, the kind of solid family background and stable job that checks all the right boxes. Who's that? He leaned in to whisper to Beatriz, eyes bouncing between the phantom and the woman walking toward them with genuine confusion written all over his face. My sister. Beatriz barely got the words out above a whisper. Your... Raphael blinked. Wait, the sister your mom said couldn't come, the one who does. What exactly? Your mother was never really clear about her whole situation. Technology. Beatriz's voice was tight, strained. She's in the technology business. Raphael looked back at the car, then back at Amara. Something shifted in his expression. Not judgment, but something closer to respect. When you come from wealth, you learn to recognize it instantly. Tech, he said, and his voice had changed completely. What branch of tech makes enough to drive a Rolls-Royce? But Beatriz didn't answer. Because in that moment, Amara began to move again. She didn't go toward Beatriz, not toward Helena. She simply continued on her original path, climbing the wide steps leading to the ceremony area. Every step was measured, elegant, inevitable. And as she passed, something strange was happening. People started to remember, to connect the dots. Santos. The last name is Santos, isn't it? A woman whispered to her friend. Didn't you read that article in Forbes about the founder of the AI company that closed a deal with Microsoft? The one who's 32 and already on the list of most influential businesswomen? Santos? Amara Santos. The name started making its way through the room, whispered at first, then spreading like electricity, person to person. Is that really her? It can't be. Helena's never said anything about... Helena probably didn't even know. Or worse, she knew and couldn't stand to admit it. Aunt Conceição had turned white as a sheet. Her years of professional gossip-mongering had taught her to recognize when a story was spiraling, and this one was avalanching out of control. Well, she tried to salvage her narrative, but her voice had lost its edge. A fancy car doesn't change anything. Success isn't really about possessions. It's about family, about integrity, about showing up for people. But nobody was even listening to her anymore. Every eye was fixed on Helena. Helena was shaking. Not in an obvious way, most people wouldn't have noticed. But her daughters would have recognized it instantly. The slight tremor running through her hands. The rapid blinking, like her brain couldn't quite process what her eyes were seeing. Helena had constructed a whole narrative, a story she'd told herself and repeated to everyone else. That Amara was the problematic daughter. The one who'd taken a questionable path. The one who'd turned her back on everything that mattered. The one who would bring shame on everyone if she dared show her face. And now that carefully constructed story was imploding in front of 200 people, destroyed by the sight of 2 million-reais worth of German engineering parked brazenly at the entrance. Amara reached the top of the steps and paused. She took a moment to look out across the garden below. All the guests, the flowers, that meticulously orchestrated picture-perfect day. And there, at the center of it all, her mother. Still motionless, still trying to make sense of what was happening. Their eyes locked across the distance. A mother and daughter who'd once meant everything to each other, now separated by a ravine carved over years of cutting remarks and deliberate rejections. Amara didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge the moment with a wave. No gesture of victory. She just held her mother's stare. In that single look was every version of herself, the 10-year-old who first heard she was difficult. The 15-year-old constantly compared unfavorably to her obedient younger sister. The 20-year-old told to abandon her unrealistic dreams and get serious. The 27-year-old who stopped going home because watching her mother's disappointment was unbearable. And then there was this version, the 32-year-old who'd built an entire empire. The one who'd proved every doubter wrong. The one who'd transformed her pain into fuel and her rejection into unshakable determination. The one who showed up anyway, even after being told not to. Who had refused to be erased. The moment broke when one of the wedding coordinators, oblivious to the tension, announced that the ceremony would start in 15 minutes and that all guests should take their seats. People started to move. Slowly at first, then with more urgency as the reality of the schedule reasserted itself. Beatriz was still standing in the same spot, tears now streaming freely down her face, ruining the makeup that 3 people had spent an hour applying. Beatriz. Raphael touched her arm gently. "Honey, we need to. The ceremony." "I know." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smudging her makeup even more. "I know, I need." But she didn't finish the sentence. Because she didn't know what she needed. To hug her sister? Scream at her mother? Go back in time and undo 5 years of complacent silence? Helena moved first. She descended from the porch in stiff, mechanical steps, like her body was running on autopilot while her mind was somewhere else entirely. She walked straight past Amara without even glancing at her. "Beatriz." Her voice was oddly hollow. "Come fix your makeup. We've got 15 minutes before this starts." "Mom, 15 minutes, Helena said again, and this time her voice had that edge. The authoritarian steel she'd always used to keep everyone in line, to maintain the facade, to make sure everything looked flawless, regardless of what was crumbling underneath. Beatriz looked at Amara one last time, a look of apology, of love, of desperation. And then she let Raphael guide her back inside, to fix her face, to prepare to walk down the aisle as if her world hadn't just turned upside down. Amara stood alone at the top of the steps. The guests were all heading to their seats now, and many of them were watching her out of the corner of their eyes, their whispers creating a constant hum of speculation. She should feel victorious. That was the plan, after all. Show up, show them, prove her worth. But victory had a strange taste. Metallic. Like blood in her mouth. Because she had seen the look on Beatriz's face. She had seen her sister's genuine happiness turn into anguish when she realized that this display of success would come with a price. That her wedding day would now be forever marked by this memory. By this tension. And she had seen Helena's expression. That shock wasn't just surprise. It was something deeper. It was the realization that she had been wrong. Completely, fundamentally wrong. And worse, that everyone now knew she had been wrong. For a woman like Helena, who had built her entire identity around being right, around knowing what was best, around protecting the family reputation, this was devastating. Amara felt something tightening in her chest. It wasn't pity. Not yet. It was something more complicated. It was the feeling of having won a battle she wasn't sure she wanted to have fought. A wedding assistant approached timidly. "Excuse me, Ms. Santos. I need to know where you are seated, so—" "I'm not on the list," Amara said softly. "I wasn't supposed to be here." The young man's face went red. "Oh, well, I'm sure we can find a spot, maybe in the back." "It's okay," Amara cut in, but not with anger, with weariness. "I'll stand." She slipped over to a pillar at the back of the ceremony space, a spot where she could see everything without being part of the main show. Not that she'd avoid the spotlight much longer anyway. The string quartet began, a piece Beatriz had clearly chosen with care. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in perfect formation, followed by the groomsmen. Then came Beatriz. Her makeup had been hastily repaired, just good enough for the photos, but her eyes told a different story. They were red from crying. She looked radiant in the way all brides do, but there was something fragile beneath the smile, something that wasn't supposed to be there today. Amara felt her heart clench. She had come to prove something, to show that she was more than the shame her mother thought she was. But in doing so, she had cast a shadow over her sister's happiest day. The ceremony began. The priest spoke of love and commitment. Raphael looked at Beatriz as if she were made of light. And Beatriz, blessed Beatriz, managed to smile, managed to say her vows, managed to make that day work, despite everything. But in the middle of the ceremony, while the priest spoke about family and unity, Amara saw Helena. Her mother was seated in the front row, where mothers always sit. Her face was composed, perfectly neutral, the mask of control she had spent decades perfecting. But her shoulders were slumped in a way Amara had never seen before, as if an invisible weight had been placed upon them and there was no way to lift it. And then, just as the priest was asking for the rings, Helena turned her head. Not completely, just enough to look over her shoulder. Her eyes met Amara's, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not words, not yet, but a recognition, an understanding that all of this, had gone too far to be resolved with polite smiles and forced hugs after the ceremony. This needed truth. And truth was the last thing the Santos family knew how to handle. The ceremony ended. Raphael kissed Beatriz. The guests applauded. Music filled the air, and everyone started moving toward the reception area, where champagne and canapes awaited. Amara stood where she was, watching, processing, and then she saw Helena stand up. Saw her mother say something brief to Aunt Conceição. Saw her pull away from the crowd, walking toward a side door that led to a private room on the estate. Helena stopped at the entrance, turned, looked directly at Amara. It wasn't a verbal invitation. It didn't need to be. It was a surrender, an admission that this could no longer be avoided. Amara took a deep breath. The noise of the celebration continued around her. Laughter, toasts, the joy of people who had no idea of the drama unfolding on the fringes of their happiness. She started walking. Through the crowd, past the decorated tables, passing Aunt Conceição, who tried to catch her eye with an expression of fake concern. Amara ignored her. She reached the side door. Helena was already inside, her back to her, looking out the window at the gardens stretching out behind the estate. Amara entered. The door closed behind them with a soft click, muffling the sounds of the celebration outside. And for the first time in 5 years, mother and daughter were alone in a closed room. The silence was so thick it felt solid, like something you could touch if you reached out. Amara could hear her own heart beating. She could feel the weight of the last 5 years in that small space. She could see every line on Helena's face, every mark time had left. Her mother seemed smaller than she remembered, more fragile, as if Amara's very presence there was crumbling something inside her. Helena broke the silence first. Of course she did. She always needed to have the last word. "You had no right to do this." Her voice came out low, but firm, controlled. "Showing up like this, causing this scene. You knew everyone would talk, would judge." Amara didn't answer immediately. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head. She had prepared speeches, arguments, defenses. But now, looking at Helena, all she could feel was a deep exhaustion. "I just wanted to know why, Mom." Her voice came out softer than she expected, almost a whisper. "Why could you never be proud of me? Why was everything I did never enough?" Helena looked away. Her hands trembled slightly, and she hid them behind her back. "You don't understand how things work, how people talk. You were always different, Amara. You always wanted to do things your way, and I tried to protect you, tried to guide you to a safer path." Safe? Amara felt the first spark of anger igniting. "You call telling me I was a disgrace protection, excluding me from my own sister's wedding? I didn't want you to suffer anymore. I suffered because you made me suffer, because you never believed in me." The volume had risen. Amara could feel 5 years of compressed pain trying to come out all at once. Helena finally faced her. Her eyes were glistening, not with anger, with something more complex, something that looked like fear mixed with regret. "Do you think it was easy for me?" Helena's voice wavered for the first time. "Seeing you leave, choosing a life I didn't understand, building things I could never have." Amara blinked. "What?" "You were always so brave, Amara. Since you were little. You were never afraid of anything. You never cared what people thought. And I..." Helena stopped, swallowed hard. "I spent my whole life caring about everything." Something was shifting in the room. Something Amara wasn't prepared to face. "I was just 18 when I married your father. 18 years old. Do you want to know what I actually wanted?" Amara couldn't speak, just shook her head. "I wanted to go to school. Go to the city. I had a scholarship lined up for fashion design. My mother said the whole thing was ridiculous. She said no respectable girl leaves home without a husband, that it would bring dishonor on us all." Amara's breath caught in her chest. "So I did what was expected. I got married. I had you girls. I stayed put. And for 35 years I told myself over and over that I'd made the right call, that I'd been responsible, that I was doing my duty." Helena's whole body was shaking now, words pouring out like she'd finally broken a seal that had been holding them in for decades. "Then you grew up. And you became everything I never had the courage to be. You got that tech scholarship and left for São Paulo without hesitation. You started a business. You refused to settle down just because you hit the right age. You actually lived." Tears streamed down Helena's face. She didn't bother to hide them. "And every single time I looked at you, every time you called me thrilled about some new project or achievement, I couldn't feel pride. All I could feel was my own failure." Amara's world tilted beneath her feet. "You were living the life I was too scared to live. And it was killing me. Because if you could do all of that, then it meant I could have too. It meant all my choices, all my so-called sacrifices. They weren't noble. They were just cowardice. Pure, simple cowardice." "Mom." "No." Helena held up a hand, tears flowing freely now. "Let me get this out. I need you to understand, everything I did to you had nothing to do with you not being good enough. It was about me. It was about not being able to face who I saw when I looked at you. You were like a mirror, and I couldn't stand what I saw." The silence that followed was completely different from before. It wasn't heavy. It felt empty, like every molecule of oxygen had been sucked out of the room. "When you started succeeding, making money, getting recognized, I kept getting smaller. Because it wasn't just that you were winning. It was that you were winning without needing anyone's blessing. You didn't need validation from anyone. You just were. You were enough." A broken sob escaped from somewhere deep in Helena's chest. "And I've spent 60 years living for everyone else's opinions, caring what people thought, trying to meet everyone's expectations, and I've never once felt like I was enough. Not once." Amara felt tears burning in her own eyes. "So when you came to me with all your wild ambitions and impossible dreams, I couldn't support you. Because the moment I did, I'd have to admit I wasted my life. I'd have to face all my choices and realize they weren't really choices at all. They were cages I locked myself inside of. You didn't waste your life, Mom. You raised 2 daughters. You built a home. I raised 2 daughters in a lie. Helena's voice cracked completely. And when one of them had the guts to actually live truthfully, I tried to crush it, because I couldn't bear the comparison. I couldn't face what I was seeing in that mirror. Helena took a step closer, her hands trembling. That message I sent you, it wasn't about you being a disgrace. It was about me. I'm the disgrace, Amara. I had every gift you have, the exact same dreams, and I buried them. Because of fear. Because of my own cowardice. Because I needed people's approval more than I needed my own life. Amara was crying now too. Silent tears running down the face she had painted so carefully a few hours ago. And the worst part? The worst part is that I knew. I always knew. Every time I criticized your choices, every time I said you were being irresponsible, every time I suggested you should do something more traditional, I knew I was lying. I knew I was projecting my own frustration onto you. Helena was very close now. Amara could see every detail of her face. She could see the raw pain in her eyes. But I couldn't stop, because stopping meant admitting it. And admitting it meant falling apart. It meant looking at my whole life and asking, what was it all for? If I could have been free, why did I choose to be a prisoner? You didn't know you had a choice, Mom. Times were different. The expectations. No. Helena shook her head hard. Don't make excuses for me. I had choices. Maybe they were harder. Maybe they came with more consequences. But I had them. And I chose the easy way. I chose approval over courage. Security over the dream. She let out another sob, and this time her whole body shook. And so, I spent 35 years convincing myself that I had been noble, that I had been responsible, that I had done the right thing, until you showed up and showed me it was all a lie. Amara couldn't speak. Her chest was too tight. When I sent that message telling you not to come to the wedding, I wasn't protecting the family. I was protecting myself, because I couldn't stand the idea of you being there. Beautiful, successful, free, while I was stuck in the same town, in the same expectations, in the same role I chose 35 years ago. Helena reached out a trembling hand and touched Amara's face. A hesitant touch, almost afraid that she would disappear. I was envious of you, my daughter. Deeply, sickly envious. And I turned that envy into criticism, into rejection, into cruelty. Amara could feel her mother's hand trembling against her face. Because it was easier to make you seem wrong than to admit I was wrong. It was easier to call you irresponsible than to admit I was a coward. It was easier to exclude you from your sister's wedding than to sit in the front row and watch you shine while I withered away. Helena had completely fallen apart now, tears falling in cascades, her body bent under the weight of decades of unspoken truths. And you know what's most terrible? I knew I was hurting you. Every message I didn't reply to, every call I cut short, every time I found a reason to criticize instead of celebrate. I knew. And I kept doing it. Because your pain was more bearable than mine. Amara felt something breaking inside her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was something deeper, more complex. It was the terrible realization that her mother wasn't a monster. She was just a person who had made bad choices for human reasons, a person who had spent her entire life trapped in a cage she built herself. Today, when I saw you getting out of that car, Helena let out a bitter laugh amidst the tears. I didn't feel shame. I felt terror. Because you were everything I could have been. And I wasted it. I wasted it, Amara. Helena let her hands fall. Her body was hunched over, defeated. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand. I needed you to know that nothing I did had to do with who you are. It had everything to do with who I didn't have the courage to be. The silence returned. But now it was different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't empty. It was charged with something new, something raw and painful and true. Amara looked at her mother, this woman she had spent her entire life trying to impress, trying to prove her worth, trying to win the unconditional love that never came. And now she understood. It wasn't that this love didn't exist. It was that Helena never knew how to give it. Because she had never received it. Because she had never given it to herself. The cycle was older than she imagined. Deeper. Sadder. Amara reached out and touched her mother's shoulder. Helena looked up, vulnerable in a way Amara had never seen. I spent 5 years waiting for an apology, Mom. I spent 5 years imagining this moment. Imagining you finally acknowledging how much you hurt me. Helena nodded, tears still falling. And now that I'm here, now that you're telling me all this? Amara paused, trying to find the right words. I don't know what to do with it. Because it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the pain. But it also changes everything. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 5 years starting to shift in her chest. Because now I understand it wasn't about me. And in some twisted way, that hurts even more. Because it means there was never anything I could do. There was never a version of me that would be good enough. Because the problem was never me. It was you seeing your own pain reflected in me. Helena sobbed louder. But it also means... Amara felt her own voice cracking. It also means I can stop trying. I can stop seeking your approval, because your approval never really had to do with me. It had to do with you managing to forgive yourself. The two women stood there, suspended in that moment of raw truth. Helena reached out with trembling hands and held Amara's. Her tears fell onto her daughter's skin, hot and salty. Can you... Helena's voice was just a broken whisper. Can you ever forgive me? The question hung between them like a fragile bridge over an abyss. A bridge that could hold or crumble with a single word. Amara looked at her mother's hands holding hers. Helena's tears fell hot on her skin, marking decades of unspoken words, of withheld hugs, of love expressed only through rejection. The question still echoed in the small room. Can you ever forgive me? Amara took a deep breath. Part of her wanted to answer with the same coldness she had received for years. Wanted to say that some wounds don't heal, that some burned bridges aren't rebuilt. But another part, the part that still remembered being a 6-year-old girl running into her mother's arms after school, that part wanted to believe that transformation was possible. I don't know, Mom. The words came out softer than Amara expected. I don't know if I can forgive everything at once. I don't know if I can forget all the times you made me feel like I wasn't enough. Helena sobbed, but didn't let go of her daughter's hands. But, Amara continued, feeling her own tears finally escape, but maybe we can start. Maybe we can try. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. It wasn't the happy ending of a fairy tale where everything is resolved with a hug and magic words. It was just a fragile, uncertain, scary beginning. But it was honest. Helena nodded, unable to speak. For long minutes, mother and daughter remained there, holding each other's hands, allowing the silence to carry the weight of words they still didn't know how to say. A soft knock on the door broke the moment. Beatriz appeared in the doorway, her wedding dress still impeccable, but her eyes red from crying. Can I come in? Her voice was hesitant. Amara nodded yes. Beatriz crossed the room and, without saying anything, wrapped them both in a tight hug. The bride, the mother, and the daughter who had been rejected, all united in a circle of pain, hope, and possibility. I'm so sorry, Beatriz murmured against Amara's shoulder. I'm so sorry for never having the courage to stand by your side, for accepting the mean comments, for participating in the silence. You deserved a better sister. You're here now, Amara replied, her voice choked up. That's what matters. They stood there for a few more minutes, 3 women of the same family trying to stitch together the pieces of relationships torn by years of misunderstanding and fear. Finally, Helena pulled away and wiped her face with trembling hands. We need to get back to the party. People will start asking questions. Beatriz nodded. It's my reception. I need to be there. But Helena shook her head. It's not just that. She looked directly at Amara, and for the first time in decades, there was something different in that look. It wasn't just shame or regret. It was courage. There is something I need to do. Something I should have done a long time ago. Amara frowned, confused, but followed her mother and sister back to the main hall. The music had stopped momentarily, and the guests were chatting animatedly, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind the scenes. Helena walked straight to the small stage where the band was taking a break. She grabbed the microphone before anyone could question her. "Excuse me." Her voice echoed through the hall, silencing the conversations. "I ask for a moment of your attention." Amara felt her heart race. What was her mother doing? Helena was trembling visibly, holding the microphone with both hands to keep it steady. Her eyes searched for Amara in the crowd and fixed on her. "Today is my daughter Beatriz's wedding day," Helena began, her voice wavering but determined. "A day of celebration, of union, of love." Aunt Conceição, sitting at a nearby table, leaned forward with interest, no doubt expecting some traditional emotional speech. "But before we continue the celebration, there is something I need to say. Something I should have said many years ago." Helena paused, taking a deep breath. Tears began to roll down again, but she didn't wipe them away. "My eldest daughter, Amara, is here today. And Helena's voice broke. "I almost stopped her from coming. I said terrible things. Words that I can never completely erase." A murmur of surprise rippled through the hall. Amara felt every eye turned toward her. She wanted to disappear, but her feet seemed glued to the floor. "For years I told myself I was protecting my family, that I was protecting us from shame, from judgment. But the truth..." Helena sobbed openly now, without trying to hide it. "The truth is that I was afraid that her success would expose my own failures, afraid that her courage would show my cowardice." The silence in the hall was absolute. Not the clink of a glass, nor a whisper. "Amara built an extraordinary life," Helena continued, her voice gaining strength through the tears. "She founded a technology company in São Paulo. She helps companies all over Brazil. She achieved everything on her own, without our help, without our support. In fact, despite our rejection." Aunt Conceição's jaw dropped. Rafael, the groom, held Beatriz's hand tightly, his eyes wide. And today, when she showed up in that beautiful car, wearing those elegant clothes, it wasn't to shame us. It was to remind us that she exists, that she has always existed, and that our love should never have been conditional on her fitting into our limited expectations. Helena was crying openly now, but she went on. "I don't expect her to forgive me. I don't expect these words to undo years of pain I caused, but I need everyone here to know." She looked directly at Amara, her eyes shining with regret and something that looked like pride. "I need everyone to know that my daughter is extraordinary, and that I was completely wrong." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with raw emotion. Then, slowly, Rafael began to applaud. Beatriz joined him, tears streaming down her face. One by one, the guests stood up, applauding. It wasn't a triumphant ovation. It was something quieter, more respectful. It was acknowledgement, validation, public testimony of a truth that had been denied for too long. Amara felt the tears roll freely. They weren't tears of absolute victory, because this wasn't a victory in the traditional sense. They were tears of relief, of validation, of a weight being partially lifted after decades pressing on her shoulders. Helena came down from the stage with difficulty, her legs shaking. She walked directly to Amara and stopped in front of her, not knowing exactly what to do. Amara took the first step, wrapping her mother in a hug. It wasn't a full hug, without reservations. There was still pain there were still wounds that would take years to heal. But it was real. It was honest. "Thank you," Amara whispered in her mother's ear, "for finally seeing me." Helena squeezed her daughter tightly, sobbing against her shoulder. I'm sorry it took so long." When they pulled apart, Beatriz was there, smiling through her tears. "Come dance with us," she asked Amara, extending her hand. "Please. It's my wedding and I want my sister on the dance floor." Amara hesitated for just a second before accepting her sister's hand. The three women returned to the reception, where the music had started again, softer now, almost like a soundtrack for a new beginning. Amara danced. She talked to some cousins she hadn't seen in years, who now looked at her with a mix of curiosity and renewed respect. She accepted a glass of champagne from a waiter passing by. She allowed herself, for the first time in a long time, to exist in that space without armor, without defensiveness. But as the night wore on, Amara felt it was time to go. Not because she was running away, not because she felt uncomfortable, simply because she had said what she needed to say, had heard what she needed to hear, and now she needed to process all of that. She said goodbye to Beatriz with a long hug. "Be happy," Amara whispered. "You too," Beatriz replied, squeezing her sister's hand. "And don't disappear again, okay? We have a lot of time to make up for." "I won't disappear," Amara promised, and for the first time, she felt she could keep that promise. Helena walked her to the door. Mother and daughter stood there, under the soft garden lights, not knowing exactly how to say goodbye. "It will take time," Amara said finally, "to trust again, to believe that things can really be different." "I know," Helena replied, her voice still hoarse from crying so much. "And I will wait as long as necessary. I will do better. I promise I will do better." Amara nodded. "I need that. I need to see actions, not just words." "You will see," Helena affirmed, with a conviction that Amara didn't know if she could trust yet, but wanted to be able to. They hugged one last time, a brief but meaningful hug. Amara walked to the parked Rolls-Royce, the heavy keys in her hand. Before getting in, she turned one last time to look at the illuminated ballroom, the music spilling out through the open windows, the silhouettes of people dancing. Her family was inside, imperfect, broken in places, trying to mend in others. And for the first time, there was a real possibility that she could be part of it. Not because she had proven her worth through an expensive car or designer clothes, but because she had finally been seen for who she really was. But as she slid into the car and started the engine, Amara realized something fundamental. Her mother's validation had been important. The public recognition had brought a kind of relief she didn't know she needed. But that wasn't what made her feel complete. True wealth wasn't in the Rolls-Royce. It wasn't in the company she had built or the luxury apartment in São Paulo. It wasn't even in her family's hesitant forgiveness. True wealth was in the courage she had found within herself. The courage to show up even when they said she wasn't welcome. The courage to exist fully even when they tried to make her feel too small, too strange, too different. True wealth was knowing, deep in her soul, that she was enough. Not because someone finally validated that, but because she had chosen to believe it even when no one else did. Amara thought of all the women who came before her, the grandmothers and great-grandmothers who had faced their own judgments, their own rejections, the women who, through generations, had learned to find strength not in the approval of others, but in the certainty of their own worth. There was an ancient wisdom in that, passed down through stories told around fires, through songs sung in languages she no longer spoke fluently, but that still echoed in her blood. The wisdom that what you own does not define your wealth. What defines it is the courage to claim your worth when others try to deny it. Amara drove down the dark road, leaving Ribeirão Preto behind. The city lights grew smaller in the rearview mirror, but she felt no sadness. She felt something different, something like peace. Maybe things with her family would get better. Maybe Helena would actually do the work needed to rebuild trust. Maybe Beatriz would become the ally Amara always wished she had. Or maybe not. Maybe progress would be slow, painful, with relapses and disappointments along the way. But now Amara knew something she didn't know when she arrived that morning. She knew she didn't need their validation to be whole. She didn't need their conditional love to love herself unconditionally. She had come seeking to prove her worth. But in truth, her worth had never been in question. It had been there all along, waiting for her to recognize it herself. The Rolls-Royce glided smoothly along the highway, taking her back to São Paulo, back to the life she had built with her own hands, back to the future she was creating herself. And for the first time in her life, Amara wasn't driving away from something. She was driving toward herself. The woman who was always enough, even when no one told her so. The woman who was rich not by what she owned, but by her refusal to let others define her worth. The woman who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that self-love isn't a gift you wait to receive from others. It's a choice you make for yourself, every day, regardless of who approves or disapproves. The city lights began to appear on the horizon, a sea of possibilities shining in the darkness. Amara Santos, 32 years old, tech entrepreneur, daughter of Helena, sister of Beatriz, was driving her Rolls-Royce back home. Not as someone seeking approval, not as someone proving a point, but as someone who finally, truly, knew she was enough. And that awareness, that unshakable certainty of her own worth, was the truest wealth she could possess. A wealth that no one could give her, and that no one could ever take away.